My feeling is that when you look at how organizations that are confronted with digitization efforts that have a profound impact, that they do not see the extent of the impact and that they jump on initial ideas rather than a profound understanding. I'm not sure whether you should ask organizations to first have that profound understanding, because it takes away their reaction speed. It's probably good that organizations become a little bit like a set of agile teams that try out new things and get accustomed to also cutting off initiatives that don't work, but just try them and evolve into a trial and error kind of approach where making errors is also not bad. There are many large organizations that I've worked with in the past. You have a stigma if you've made a mistake, and that is probably more true in Europe than it is in other parts. So people are afraid of making mistakes, and this kind of agile working where you try and fail and try again is something that needs to become part of the DNA of a company. Companies that have been most successful in dealing with digital transformation are often companies that have a history of transformations per se. There are companies that have started as a mining company, that became a chemical company, that became an IT company, and those companies, they have in their DNA this idea we can reinvent ourselves. And I think that is an important part. And you see also in younger startups that don't have that history, they can do that. But sometimes if they are really strong disruptors, they had to so much fight against the existing status quo that they become almost like a cult, and they are not flexible themselves anymore because they were so much proving their own point by being the way they were. And then you can sometimes see that old economy companies can leapfrog, and then they said, oh, we missed it the first time, but the next time we jump over them and then we become more agile again. I think the fintechs are posing a real challenge to banks. They're coming up in all sorts of areas, and they allow to unbundle certain offerings that all service banks are not able to compete on all fronts. And as there is an unbundling, then these digital startups in small areas can do really well. There are banks that are saying we buy up these unbundlers. Some buy them up to then kill them. Others buy them up to then really integrate them and use them as a kind of a accelerator to boost their own change. And I think that is by far the smarter approach, because you can buy up one, but there will be 20 others that will jump up. Well, we've seen major disruptions in the travel industry. We are going to see major disruptions in logistics and the manufacturing area as well. I do expect large disruptions in the healthcare industry. That hasn't happened yet so far, but I do expect that will be big as well. I think it will do both. It will solve problems in the sense of that it will create some transparency between departments, and it forces organizations to cut away silos and to try to integrate that. It will increase problems or complexity in the sense that also business models will be changing potentially as data becomes an important part of the competitive differentiation, and that requires a different kind of thinking. It also requires that departments work together in different ways than they used to, and that, I think, adds to the mix. I think they have to some extent. When I originally did my research in how managers cope with different amounts of data, I studied managers both in the US and in Europe. And although I could see that in the US they were probably more accustomed at that moment, which was like some 20 years ago, there was already more information available to them. They were not doing better. They were just able to cope with more information. So I think as people are getting more aware of dealing with more information, they don't necessarily get better at it. A large amount of information will lead people to believe whatever hypothesis they have in their heads. So a confirmation bias. If you think the world looks like this, you will always find data that seem to suggest that indeed the world looks like that. If that is part of a bigger picture, you may not look at that bigger picture anymore because the amount of information may overwhelm you. we're trying to do some studies into human acceptance of this advice. So you have on the one side, you have the quality of the advice. On the other side, you have the kind of trust. And what we see is the rate of innovation on technology goes always faster than whatever we had expected. And the rate of change on how people perceive these kinds of things often goes slower than what we expected. And definitely much slower than the technology is going up. I think the jury is still out on this one. I see that people are beginning to get some kind of acceptance on simple robo-advisory for like a travel website or things like that. I think if your money is on the line, if your family values and if there is trust that has been built up for a long time, I think that will be a candidate much further down the line. I'm not saying it will never happen, and I do think that there will be some supplemental things that will aid, but I think that the value of the person interaction will stay there for a very long time.